Well, week one of 2025 General Assembly is in the books. We completed the first week of the legislative session, got to swear in on Tuesday of this past week, and it was really exciting. It was a good day. We had a lot of new legislators there and a lot of new people coming in, and it was a big day. Our families are there, and we get to meet the new people and meet their families. And the Supreme Court Chief Justice was there to do a ceremonial swearing in, and then we actually all swear in together on the floor and take the oath that we have never fought a deadly duel and that we have never attempted to fight a deadly duel. And I'm confident there were some people that lied on that oath.
Is there a difference between a regular duel and a deadly duel? Or?
Yeah, it's actually a duel with a deadly weapon. And so I guess you can fight a duel as long as it's not with a deadly weapon. And the only way to determine that is if the person didn't die, it evidently wasn't a deadly weapon, I guess. I don't know how that works. But anyway, it's always interesting.
Was it Chief Justice of Kentucky Supreme Court?
Kentucky Supreme Court, yeah. And I don't know, I think she swore in on Friday, so I think maybe she's the first female Chief Justice of the Kentucky Supreme Court. And a little bit of switch up there on the Supreme Court, had some two people go out and two come in, I believe. And it's going to definitely make a difference in the days to come. One particular that went out, and a person come in taking their place, of which Andy Beshear really supported and helped do fundraising for. So it always gives me check whenever he gets involved in something like that.
Nonpartisan.
Oh, yeah.
Nonpartisan race.
Nonpartisan, exactly. But it was a good week. A lot of bills were filed, and between the House and the Senate, I was trying to look because they always hold some numbers back in the beginning numbers. So House Bill 1 through 10 or Senate Bill 1 through 10 is typically going to be a bill that is of high priority. And so a lot of times those bills don't get filed until later in the session because they're working them through or whatever the strategy may be. So in the House, we're at 213 bills that have been filed in the first 4 days of the legislative session, and that being House Bill 1 and 2 is filed, and then it jumps to 15, and then up to 213. So around 200 bills in the House have been filed, and then in the Senate, they have right now, they're at, it looks like that they filed about 80 bills so far. So 280 bills in 4 days. I don't know. That's not too bad, right? I don't know what the record is. I know that the Senate had an unwritten rule in the Republican caucus that they were only going to file 5 bills per legislator. And so I think they were trying to hold to that. On the House side, it's kind of been a free-for-all. So had a lot of different types of bills filed. And I filed several bills as well. And so that's really what I want to talk about on this session. I want to let people know our last podcast that we did, we talked about some things that I was personally going to file, some things that we felt like needed to be addressed in the legislative session. And so a lot of those bills have got filed. I think the bill that probably people noticed the most was House Bill 1. It passed out of the House this past week, and that particular bill lowered the personal income tax rate from 4% to 3.5%. So there's been this talk of this goal that we get to 0% personal income tax, and it's getting harder and harder to get there. There's a lot of discussion of whether or not we'll actually get there. And we had some good discussion and good dialogue about it and really pushed it pretty hard. Representative Steve Doan brought an amendment to the floor to that bill that would actually force us to, by 2029, be at 0. and he wasn't able to bring it up for a vote. It was ruled that it was unconstitutional because it would put our budget out of balance, and it didn't make it for a vote. But there are a lot of people that have their sights set on the zero, and we're at a point that we're going to be forced to do what we should have already done and should have been going on since we took over the majority, and that is that we've got to start cutting. We have to start looking at waste, fraud, and abuse in every area of government and start cutting. My thought was low-hanging fruit. We got tens of millions of dollars going to DEI in our colleges and helping indoctrinate people on racism, which is, boggles my mind that we do that. But there will be a bill that comes this session. I actually filed a bill that would remove the requirement for colleges to have to meet DEI requirements in order to add new programs. So basically, it would make the DEI program at the discretion of the individual colleges, and have some traction, some support for it. There are some colleges that have reached out to me, some presidents that have said, "Hey, we support this," and just the demographics of the area of where the college is, they cannot meet the requirements. So they're doing a lot of lip service and trying to make it look like something that's not. And sometimes they can't add new programs because they don't meet some DEI requirement. So,
and DEI is basically anti-whiteism, pretty much what it. Every color except white people and Asians. Is that kind of how it comes down to? Like your
division, exclusion, and indoctrination.
Right.
Is what I call it.
Well, when they post the jobs or post, the requirements, then most of the time the only requirement is don't be white.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what it is.
Well, we've had some of the presidents.
Or you can be white, but you got to be trans or something like that.
You have to meet some kind of diversity number. It's crazy. We used to be a country that was so driven by meritocracy. It was about who was the best at the job and hire them, and you look at this is a tangent, but look at what's going on in California right now. And I assure you that if they could go back and do some rehiring, they probably would have chosen different.
You see the video about the lesbian lady saying, whenever some wife asks me, well, can you carry my husband out of a fire? Then I tell them, well, it looks like your husband got himself in the wrong spot if I have to carry him out or something.
Yes.
I actually saw that on the way over here.
We were talking about that on the way over here. It's crazy that people have bought into this idea that they are driving racism and driving division in our country. They want division. They want to divide us up in classes. And
she said like, well, I think it's important that when somebody shows up to save you from the fire, that they know, some people, like, I guess she's showing up to save black lesbian people from fires because it's comforting to them
see
when
someone
you
that
look
looks like them. No,
like, I think they just want to get out of
what's
the fire.
comforting to me
Please
is
get me out of here.
Can you get me out of here? I mean, that should be what it's about.
Right. Oh, you can't carry me, but you're a black lesbian, so I'm dying in glory or whatever. I don't know.
I don't know. It's crazy what is going on across our country. And I put this out. I tried to every so often put out that it's time for DEI to DIE in Kentucky. And somebody will always respond everywhere across the country. Yeah, I agree. I can't influence everywhere specifically, but I can in Kentucky. And I think Representative Jennifer Decker will file a DEI bill again. for post-secondary. We've got to be looking at this in K through 12 as well. And but I filed a specific bill. So let's get into some of the bills and talk about them. I know Angie got to go with me a couple days, and one particular bill that I filed on day one was a bill around the Ten Commandments. So we talked about this in our last podcast, and I put it out there, and we've really seen some good response about bringing the Ten Commandments back into the public sphere, and specifically in our public schools, and helping kids understand the historical aspect of them and the importance of how that they were utilized. Those Ten Commandments were utilized to build the structure of our laws and the basis of our laws. And there's always crazy pushback that we've had on that. And we were just talking about it earlier today about the concept, like, why do people push back against the concept of teaching children, thou shalt not kill?
The Ten Commandments, right? I get, okay, so there's some specifically the Lord's name in vain, right? Mm-hmm. No other God before me, but you have some that are just, they're already the law of the land. So what is the harm in a child seeing that in a school? There's not only been some backlash, but there has been some pretty negative reaction to it, and scathing remarks to him, almost as, how dare you put the Ten Commandments in front of my kids?
No, somebody cussed me and they said, I will literally rip that junk off the wall.
So what is going to happen to your kids if they see the Ten Commandments? Somebody said they could literally get interested and actually become a Christian. Oh no. Oh. Like, you see what I'm saying?
What's the great tragedy?
What's the great tragedy there? But don't kill. Mm-hmm. Don't steal. Right. There's some that's, don't commit adultery. And yes, do people do that? Yes. But if somebody has done it, they would still encourage people like, hey, don't do that. It's not the best way to go. So is it because the ones that say, thou shalt have no other gods before me?
And I've had...
Is that the...
Well, I mean, you're spiritually, then it's just the rebellion of man against the laws of God. If I were just going to simplify it spiritually, man has, by nature, he wants to rebel against everything that God thinks is moral, that God says is moral.
Yeah.
And every law that God makes, then man just naturally has it inside of him whenever he's born because of, Adam and all that, to rebel against it. So, I mean, that's, I guess, the theological or doctrinal answer.
But the frustrating part is there's groups that advocate for pornographic material to be available to elementary kids, for gender-affirming things, all the groups, mm-hmm. for drag queens to read to your toddlers or to read in story time and do all these things. But don't you dare.
Well, it reveals their intentions as well, because they think that displaying the Ten Commandments, somebody might become a Christian. They also think that displaying all of that pornographic stuff will turn people into trans and lesbian, and they want that or whatever. So it displays their intention as well.
Exactly right.
We know from a doctrinal perspective that a display of the law of God is a revulsion. Man's nature is revolted by that immediately. You know what I'm trying to say there? Until he comes to a place where he understands, hey, my choices that I've made and what I want to do aren't good for my life. Yeah. And he begins to turn to the Lord and see things the Lord's way through the conviction of the Holy Spirit. You can talk about all that. So we understand that displaying of the Ten Commandments doesn't force somebody to become a Christian.
Right.
But that's what they think it does. And that's what they want to do with their propaganda.
A little bit on both sides. There's a whole lot on one side. And then there's, people that talk about the state sanctioned religion. And that's not at all what this is about. This is about as a moral nation and as a historical aspect of what the laws of our nation were built upon, and basically, it's the whole aspect of government is to, we're to keep people from being hurt, right, and we're to keep people from being stolen from. It's life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness that was actually property is what that was equated to. So,
and I don't have anything against libertarian people. There's a lot of people that identify as libertarian, or identify probably ain't the right term, but but sometimes it seems like libertarians and conservatives get mixed up. People mix them up. A libertarian and conservative aren't the same thing, because a libertarian will almost be anti-religion, or anti-Christianity in a lot of ways, saying, well, the government doesn't have any say in that. That's not constitutional either. I mean, we are one nation under God. That's what we say in our Pledge of Allegiance. That's in the, Declaration of Independence. It's in all the founder stuff, so the founders weren't libertarians is basically what I'm saying. And if we allow libertarians to be the only leaders of the conservative movement, we won't ever get back to our founding. That doesn't mean that they aren't correct on economic policy and all of those things. But whenever you're talking about the morality of the nation, our founders had a very good understanding that if things weren't in our culture founded on scriptural principles and in our governments founded on scriptural principles, we would simply go the way of every other government that's ever existed.
And when it comes to libertarians, just like any other political affiliation, there are people from all different spectrums that are engaged in that. And I think one time you said it well when you said in regard to not being able to necessarily legislate morality, but we are making sure that we don't legislate immorality, and which is a good perspective to look at it. That's the whole. But
sometimes I would say that, not every libertarian, but a lot of libertarians can't define for you what is morality and immorality. They can't tell the difference whenever it comes to government policy sometimes.
Yeah.
So what you or I might say, well, we're not legislating morality here. We're stopping immorality from being legislated. Then they would say, no, you actually are. There's a little bit of confusion sometimes. I'm not saying all libertarians,
No, there's no doubt. But that is a bill that's out there, and I think there's some interest in it from a legislative standpoint with other legislators. Was there 9 co-sponsors?
I think there was 9 co-sponsors.
I think at this point, Representative Richard White filed a 10 Commandments bill as well, and that bill basically just allows for the individual school districts to vote and decide if they want it or don't want it, which is an interesting compromise or concept. We don't know where it'll go, so we'll just have to see. So that is a bill that I filed. Another bill that I filed that I think it's important that we address was the rescinding of the governor's executive order banning conversion therapy. And I've also received some pushback on that, as you could imagine. But at the very basic aspect of this, okay, the governor is not a legislator. If he wants to make law, resign from your position and go run for office.
He won't even work with the legislature.
No. So we, at the very least, put it through the legislative process.
Yeah, a lot of times governors will kind of craft something and then work with the legislature to introduce something to the bill, and then they'll sign it and he'll approve of it. So if he wanted to do something like this, then he could say, well, I'll get so-and-so to sponsor it and I'll work with leadership to try to get it passed. We'll ban electroshock or whatever that is, but that isn't the point.
That's right.
Well, we cover that.
Yes, and so a lot of people don't understand just because, if you've not read about it or different things, they think conversion therapy, is Josh is for torturing people. Okay. If they don't believe the way that he believes, then they talked about beating, food deprivation, electric shock, and doing all that. And so
Exposing them to pornography, which I have fought against
Right.
since I've been in the legislature to keep kids from being exposed to pornography. And some of the same people that have pushed against me exposing kids to pornography and allowing them to be exposed to it in the school system are pushing back against this bill, saying they shouldn't be exposed to pornography.
Well,
and I agree with that aspect. And I am open, and I haven't went and said this publicly a lot because I haven't had much public dialogue about it. But I'm absolutely open to looking at any type of abuse that is happening from a counseling standpoint in that regard. Let's deal with it. If it's going on, let's address it. This executive order is a one-way street that specifically revolves around communication for the most part. Not what she just brought up.
And clarify that we are not for hurting or harming anybody. And those practices are illegal anyway. You can't abuse children like that. So it's not like we're trying to advocate for that. And that's what people, because they've sent emails and things. Why are you for the abuse of kids? Right. We're not for the abuse of kids.
Oh, it's just somebody messaged me and they're like, you're trash. You're going to get a bullet through your head. I hope you speak Smith & Wesson and you're a Nazi, right?
Isn't that nice? Nice.
But this is the thing. This is the thing is that the governor pushed this through because they only want affirmation. That's it. They do not want you to tell somebody with the simple truth that there could be another way. And they just want one-way street. So it's a issue in regard to deceiving the minds of confused children, and it's an issue from a First Amendment standpoint of being able to speak both sides of an issue.
It's the only disorder out there where they affirm the lie.
Yeah.
And it's crazy.
And it's still just how deceptive, as a general rule, the leadership of the Democratic Party has become to talk about conversion therapy for so many years as shock treatment. And then whenever it's time for them to make a policy or sign an executive order, they completely redefine conversion therapy to ban Christians from talking about being Christians or what it means to be delivered from a lifestyle that is destroying the lives of children, or that is, or that is wreaking havoc in somebody's life, and they have nowhere to turn to. Everywhere they turn to in the state is saying, oh, there's nothing wrong with you, even though you've suffered all of this abuse. They cover the abuse. Will not, whatever happens, you know what I'm saying? In order to, they just redefine everything and then acts like you're the bad guy whenever you're the one who's actually wanting to help solve their problem.
But at the very least, he's not a policymaker. He shouldn't be a policymaker. Right. He shouldn't be engaged in making policy. So we need to address it. So we filed
everything
a bill
that he does to try to make policy is absolutely trash anyway.
Right.
It's all failed.
But that executive order also takes away some parental control as well, because if you are faith-based or if you have a different opinion, they're saying it doesn't matter what you think. We know what's best for your kid.
Yeah.
I saw a good thing today, and I know we have several other bills, so I don't want to take up too much time here. But I did see a good thing today that there was a theory back in the 50s, that these people thought that the way to bring America into socialism or some form of socialism was to take over the culture, and that's how you would convince people to embrace socialism. And the person was saying today, they controlled all of the culture. They controlled the education. They controlled the flow of information. They suppressed speech, did all of that stuff, and Trump still won. And a lot of the Democratic Party people like Andy Beshear are looking around and realizing that the only way that they can implement their strategy is by force.
That's right.
And that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Forced compliance, forced affirmation.
Yeah. Another bill that I filed is House Bill 154, and we had seen back in the month of December, maybe it was November, in a committee meeting, there was some information that had been brought forward that they were pushing through Department of Corrections that the taxpayer is on the hook for paying for transitions, gender transitions. First of all, a person cannot change their gender, right? There's males and females, and neither can become the other. But it's going on. I'd actually had some people in the Department of Corrections, inmates, that had reached out that said it is going on in that particular prison.
Right.
And there were some basic physical needs that were not being met from what they were saying, but yet these people that were wanting hormone blockers and puberty blockers, things of that nature, were able to get them. And so I filed a bill that it basically says for anything of that sort, whether it be Medicare, Medicaid, K-CHIP, any government entity, the taxpayer cannot be on the hook for medications or surgeries associated with transition. I think that's common sense. So,
but they're going to say that you're driving people to depression, anxiety. You're causing.
We've had people reach out and
so how bad was the depression and mental health before the taxpayers were funding all this?
Yeah.
It's just so
it was a whole
bizarre.
lot better then, So,
Yeah.
There's never any logical, argument to it. It's always an emotional argument. You're
Right.
killing people. No, we're not. We're not here to kill people.
And with
We're
all
here to
their
save
studies
people's
that they've done, there's not evidence to prove that if you do gender affirming care, if you let them surgically change their bodies, if you do all these things, that the suicide rate or the depression rate or any of that is any better. It's actually worse. And I have said this from the beginning. A day of reckoning is coming when some of these kids get to an age and they understand what was done to them. They will be angry.
And their
Backlash is
demonization and censorship of the detransitioners is irrefutable evidence that it's not about science.
That's right.
Because science would take all of that into account
Yes.
before making a conclusion. But they suppress the studies that don't show what they want them to show. They doctor the studies so that they do show what they want it to show. And what is the result? They get to absolutely mutilate children.
And
what kind of messed up?
And I don't recommend that you watch some of the procedures, but I have, and it is horrendous. And I just can't.
Just the 3D graph, not the actual.
Right.
Yeah.
And it is, and the healing time and all the things that, and it's never right. It never works the way they want it to because you can't be that.
There's this guy that was going around. He's got like red curly hair or whatever. And he keeps getting misgendered at restaurants because he has like the deepest voice, and I was like, does he never walk into a place and get misgendered or whatever, gets called a man because that's what he is, and think, hey, maybe I just look like a man. I don't know. Maybe the curly hair and the makeup just isn't working.
It's not helping.
They never think of that. It's always like, you're the problem. Like, no, you look and sound like a dude because you are a dude.
But the thing about it is that it's not only that,
Right.
but it's also take your money and pay for me to fix this so that I can look more like a female
like
or look more like a male.
It's like forcing the taxpayers to fund time travel.
Yeah.
It's just never going to happen. Sorry, not going to happen.
You might not want to say that to Elon. Elon might differ with you on that. Yeah. Time travel. First, he'll get to Mars first, and then he'll probably be looking
backwards.
at the.
You can't go backwards.
The time travel. But anyway, so that's a particular bill that I filed. Kenny Massaroni and myself, TJ Roberts, put a bill out on this past Friday, and that House bill number is, I think it's 179, but it would allow for capital punishment for someone that would sexually abuse a child under 12. And so I think it's important that we keep highlighting these issues, these egregious crimes against children, things that kids absolutely never get over, and make sure that we are addressing them forcefully. And there was a bill that was filed this session to eliminate the death penalty, and we filed a bill to increase the death penalty. Nobody's been killed in the state of Kentucky by the death penalty since 2008, I believe it was. But it's important that we keep these issues in the forefront. We have conversations about them. We're protecting kids. We got 375,000 kids that have come across the border that are gone. Nobody knows where they are, supposedly, and I know Tom Homan has said he's committed to find them. I've reached out to the Trump administration and let them know we're committed to do anything within our power to help find these kids, but we have to address abuse. It's unacceptable.
That bill is for violent sexual assault of someone 12 and under, or under 12? Okay. Do you think that bill will be heard?
I don't know. Tennessee passed the bill and the governor signed into law in their last legislative session. And there's people on both sides of this issue, of the death penalty issue. So you have people that are passive toward all crime, and then you have people who claims that their faith does not allow them to sanction murder of an individual. The murder of an individual is what they would call it. And so you have people on both sides of the issue. So I don't really know what the whip count would be, the total number of votes that a bill like that would get, but we're going to work it. Robbie Starbuck out of Tennessee, who helped get the Tennessee bill filed, is committed to trying to help us get this bill through and message on it and let the public be aware that it's out there. And so I think it's something important.
Ryan Dotson also filed a bill that had to do with sexual abuse too,
correct.
Right? Or
and
something
it's
with
the chemical castration as well. So there's quite a few bills that are hitting this issue, which I think is important. I ran for office for the protection of kids' hearts, minds, and bodies and souls, and everything that we can do to protect them from a governmental standpoint, right. And making sure that we keep these topics of discussion in the public. If we stop talking about it, it goes away. We forget about it,
And here's, I have discussions with people about this, and let's say, for instance, like what we were talking about last week, then they say, well, what about false allegations or whatever? I think that's pretty small. I understand as well that we are living in a time where people are frequently making false allegations about very serious crimes in order to gain notoriety or money or all this stuff. I understand all of that. And I don't think that needs to be discounted for sure.
Right.
But there has to be clear evidence, that something happened, At the same time, I've heard people push back, for instance, saying, well, the most of the time where abuse cases are reported is at school, and so that is a valuable resource for reporting abuse cases. Totally fine with that. What about all the ones that get covered up at school?
Yeah.
If there's 29,000 cases of sexual abuse at public schools every year in the United States, which is a number that I've seen thrown around. Don't know how true it is, but I think that's from, the people were pretty reliable sources. If that's the case, when do we look at that and say, well, how reliable is the school system? That doesn't mean that it's not reliable and that it doesn't help. And then you also have to start diving into, well, what percentage of these are step parents? People don't want to have that conversation because they think that you're trying to demonize divorce. But at the end of the day, a lot of times we're trying to make policies and people want to criticize these policies or these bills, but you're trying to try your best to fix a problem in society because people don't want to have the real conversations about how to fix it. Yeah. You know, and people would like lose their minds if you were to say, well, it's actually safer for children. They have a lower chance of being sexually abused if their parents don't get divorced and remarried. Then they think, well, you're some kind of like bigot or tyrant. Like, no, you're not. It's just statistically this is the case. They don't want to look into that. And so most of the time what ends up happening is these bills get filed and people just don't want to touch it. Yeah. And the kids just keep getting abused.
I've put it this way often, that stating what is best is not an attack on someone who has overcome a statistic, right? Like there are single parents out there that have done a phenomenal job in parenting a child or children. Yes. And raise them, put them through college, you know, whatever. There's heroic stories in every aspect of life. So, but to state what's actually best statistically is not an attack on that. It's just to say that if this is what we do, the outcome statistically is going to be better. Right. And I think we have to keep those things out in the forefront of conversation.
That should be all that the government ever is involved in. Yeah. What is the best? Right. That's it. So whenever they're teaching sex ed at schools or whatever, they should not be teaching about 15 million genders. Yeah. They should be teaching you what is safest for you, what is healthiest for you. That's all the government should be involved in teaching. If their parents want to indoctrinate them in all those other things, they can go put them in a private school. Mm-hmm. Especially whenever they want to talk about now public schools, only public schools get public dollars. Yeah. Then public dollars need to only promote what is safest and healthiest for the public. Yeah. That's it. Not what, fantasy the Democrats dream up. And that is abstinence, monogamy, getting married before you, sleep with anybody and sleeping with that person for the rest of your life. That's all the government should be teaching you. That is the healthiest for you. It's the most healthy for you mentally. It's the most healthy for you physically, emotionally, all that. That's all the government should be teaching. They shouldn't be teaching about body positivity. You know what I'm saying? You can weigh 300 pounds and you're just big boned or whatever they're, whatever scientific description they have now. They should teach only what is healthiest for you. No, you can't eat 1,600 donuts a day and be healthy. That's just not how it works.
And we've tried it, right?
Yeah. And you say something like that and people say, well, you're overweight. Well, yeah, I am overweight, but I don't go around telling everybody that I'm a supermodel, and expecting a modeling contract. Because I know if I took my shirt off and was modeling something, people would be like, ugh, I'm not buying that, The government should never be involved in forcing, unhealthy behaviors and forcing people to.
Well, I've got news for you. The government has been involved in lies for a long time. So,
oh my goodness,
that's pretty much all it's about.
Something about Operation, or watched something, a little documentary thing about Operation. What was it called? The sting against Trump that got George Papadopoulos. Yeah. Hurricane Crossfire or something like that. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable how much money the FBI spent to try to put George Papadopoulos in jail. I mean, unbelievable how much money they spent with foreign contacts, flying in. Like one of the dudes hired a lady from Russia to pretend to be Putin's or Medvedev's niece or something, insanity, absolute insanity. Flew him to Israel. It's absolutely unbelievable. Gave him $10,000 cash. He didn't bring it back because they were going to try to arrest him that way. Couldn't get him that way. It's unbelievable.
Not our government.
Our government's crazy.
No. I refuse to believe it. We can only hope that on January the 20th that things start looking up. Some of that gets addressed. And by the way, I was hoping to attend the inauguration, got tickets for it, and I'm not going to be able to go. And so I kind of hate that. But we also are hearing that some of these people that our government has targeted from January the 6th are going to get released potentially on that day or the day after. And so we're going to stay here and try to help if some of them need help getting somewhere or need something specifically, a place to stay for the night, whatever the case may be. There's some people that's trying to do that. But anyway, total different subject, but your government will lie to you. So let's talk about a few more bills before we get done here. I think it's important to highlight there are some bills that have been filed to address taxes. So one is around vehicle taxes that Representative Maddox has filed that would that will remove the annual requirement for taxes to be paid on your vehicle that you bought.
You need to be a yes vote on that, right?
We need to get that bill to the floor. And there's a lot of people question, how do we pay for it? Where do we make up the revenue and those types of things? And again, we're at a place nearly in our budget that we're going to have to do a major doge, or we're going to have to cut. We're going to have to look for places that we can cut. And
now didn't Tennessee raise their sales tax whenever they took away their income tax?
They did. They did.
It's like 10% or something.
So yeah, they have a higher sales tax, and that's some of what has happened in Kentucky. So there are quite a few things still yet that are exempt. And so they took some of those things that were exempt and they raised or put the 6% sales tax on them. And that's how some of it has been offset for the lowering of the personal income tax.
That doesn't solve the waste.
Correct. No. And that's where we're at. We're going to have to get into looking at the waste and the abuse and programs. And this is the thing. This is a place where conservatives typically start backing up,
right? Because
it gets painful. It is very hard to take away something from someone. It's harder to do that than it is to never actually give it. And so we're just going to have to look across the board, and there's some ideas and some thoughts, and I won't get into it on this podcast, but we've got to start looking at that. So that's one bill. Another bill that was filed, I don't remember the bill number, but it was a bill that would remove, if you were 65 or older, you wouldn't have to pay property taxes. And that's something that we've discussed. There's a bill that's been filed that removes taxes from veterans. So it's interesting to me that we're starting to have this discussion about taxes are an actual problem. And I've told people often, these people that go after the First Amendment, these people that go after our Second Amendment, I'm like, what about the 16th? Nobody ever comes after the 16th Amendment, the amendment that allows our government to tax our money. Right. Why do they not want to violate that one? But we do have to, we've got to look at it and see. So those are some bills that you will hear a lot about, but you will not see movement on in this session, possibly just because of the fact, in order to give a tax cut, you've got to cut somewhere else.
So it'll be just a budgetary. Have to wait till the budget year, or
it's not
or
just
there's no.
It's not just there has to be the will to do it, and so the excuse for this session is it's not a budget year, which we can do things and date it for the budget, but it's not a budget year, and so you won't see the budget if any at all. Very little will it be opened up during a non-budget year session.
And the most insane out of all the insane taxes that we have, to me, is the property tax, because you are paying the government for your right to own the property that the government is supposed to be protecting your right to own. That's like one of the fundamental things about American society is your right to own property. Mm-hmm. And we kind of agreed, our forefathers agreed that that's what the government was supposed to do, give us the freedom to own property. And then somehow the government hoodwinked some of us a few years ago into saying, yeah, we'll pay the government for our right for the government to protect that, what we already agreed about that they wouldn't infringe on, and if even if your property's paid off and you've paid your property taxes your whole life, then, and you miss a year, then they can sell it and take your property.
Yeah, or put a lien against it or whatever.
If they can take it, then you don't own it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, and what I said about the will to do it, and I'll close out this particular podcast just helping people understand that your voice has got to be heard in order for some of this legislation to move forward. And the only way that the power remains with the people is if the people hold the power. They have to talk. You have to engage. Get these bill numbers. Call your legislator. Call the committee to which that they are assigned, which is an interesting discussion because every bill in the House will get assigned to committee this year. So that rule changed. So you'll be able to see which committee that the bill gets assigned to within 5 days of it being filed. It will get assigned to a committee. You can start calling the people on that committee. You can send them emails. Talk to your legislator and let them know, we want to see this bill move. What does it take to see this bill move? And there may need to be changes made in the bill. We can have discussion. We can have dialogue. We can have debate about it. But if the people, if they do not engage, if there's not the will there to do it, it will just sit. It'll be another bill that gets filed again next session, or people just quit talking about it and it goes away.
And if somebody heard, if on the podcast this evening and they are interested in a bill and it gets assigned to a committee, is there a place that they can go to find out who is the chair of that committee and the committee members in order to do an email to them?
Yes. So you go to the Kentucky LRC website and there's a listing in there of all legislators. And then there's a listing in there of all committees. So you can go to House standing committees. And then if it's an education bill, education, it'll show you every member that is on that. You can click on that, get their email address, the phone number is there, everything that you need to know to be able to contact that legislator.
And then how do we find out which committee those bills got assigned to?
So under each bill, if you go to, again, Kentucky LRC's website, there's a bills tab. And then inside that bills tab, you'll go to 2025 general session. And then there's a breakout in there. So you can look at bills by a lot of different ways. You can look at it by just House bills, Senate bills, House bills by title and sponsor. So there's several ways you can look at it, but just go to the bill number, and then inside of that, when you click on that bill, it gives you all the information about the bill. It gives you what the bill is about or what they deem it to be about.
And that's the committee
you may
it will
need
go
to read it, but it will tell you what committee has been assigned to. So,
and then you said something last week I was going to ask you about too. So you were talking about you've been really thinking about what is necessary for the government to fund, because this kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier. So roads, you're trying to put this together. This isn't a conversation most legislators want to have, by the way, So it's kind of like you're thinking we're getting to that point as far as cuts go, that the Republican Party the Republican majority needs to be a supermajority, needs to decide really what government is supposed to be doing, and not just what can we do, what should we do.
Right. And the reason why that is that there's been some things that have been said in public that 3% is probably about as low as we can go on the personal income tax.
Mm.
That wasn't the initial discussion.
Right.
The initial discussion was that we were going to zero, right? And so now it's kind of throwing it back on the public is that, well, we can go deeper, but we're going to have to add taxes on services or we're going to have to take some of the exemptions away. We're going to have to look at, and there may be things in there that need to be done, but we also have to look at things that we are funding that are not necessities for, and that are not a function of government. They should not. That's the discussion that a lot of times we don't want to have. We don't want to talk about things that should not be a function of government.
Yeah.
It is not a function of government to give money to colleges to teach people to be racist. That's not a function. It should not be a function of government. It should be a no-brainer to cut across the board and address the DEI offices.
Now, with the Title IX stuff getting reversed this week from the Supreme Court, the Biden administration's changed to Title IX. That doesn't automatically remove the requirements from the colleges to fulfill DEI requirements or whatever Title IX requirements to get funding.
So what we have got to do is that we have to, at the state level, address these issues. So I think it's going to happen. I believe from the Senate side and the House side, I've heard people discuss. I think that the appetite is there to address it. We should have never left last session with it undone. We had the bill to do it, and it got killed on the last day. And so it's time to address that. That's just one issue that is a no-brainer, and I'll bring it up as a point that it should not be a function of government.
Because I was kind of thinking about this today on the way home, like if people were fighting over the budget last year, and it's like we're going to give this $100 million to Louisville to redo their downtown. So they spend like $27 million or $24 million of it to build a complex for homeless people that might house maybe like 40 people, or maybe it might have been like 27 units or something like that. But it's going to take years to complete, and then it's just going to help a few people. But you've spent $27 million, and a lot of the rural counties are just fighting for scraps to get their roads paved.
Right.
But if you give a rural county money to pave their roads, most of the time, that road is paved by that October or the next, or it's paved the next year. So you got like a 2-year window. So there's a big disparity between they can take that money and use it as long as they want to, but the efficiency is there with these smaller rural counties because they need that stuff.
That's right.
And there's no concept of that sometimes with the powers that be, that, hey, if we spend this money here, this is going to get done immediately. Yes. And they don't give that priority. Those people
just go look again. We started off talking about what happened in California, but they have spent billions of dollars on increasing their homelessness, right? Of having more homeless people than they've ever had. And so...
And cut $100 million from their fire budget.
Government as a whole can always find a way to waste what is ours, what belongs to the people. And that's not the role of government. It's not the function of government. So we have to get back to what is the role, what is the function, what should we be funding, and make the necessary adjustments to make it as easy on the people as possible. And that makes for a free society. That is what we should be promoting, is a free society. So there's a lot of other bills that have been filed. We could talk about them all night. We don't have all night to go through them, but
300. I mean,
there's plenty. Stay tuned to what is going on. You can watch the legislative session. If you go to the Kentucky LRC website, you can see what's going on. You can watch committee meetings. You can come to committee meetings. If you live in District 10 or you don't live in District 10, but you're interested in coming and seeing what goes on in Frankfort, reach out to me. Send an email to my legislative assistant and let me know that you want to come. We'll try to get you involved in a committee meeting that's going on. We need the public to engage. That is what happened in this presidential election. People got engaged at the grassroots level, and they made a difference. And we've got to take that to the state level. We've got to make sure that the grassroots level, that people are engaging in their politics because they affect your everyday life. Don't forget it. All right. Till next time. Thank you. God bless.